4 years after Agenda 2030 went public with their goal of bringing a global socialist government off the back of climate change, some of the very same people gathered in October 2019, just this last October, to war game on what was needed to fight a global pandemic. It was a conglomeration of business people, health experts, and government officials from all over the world. The event was called Event 201. Every year, there are about 200 outbreaks, but the big one that everyone is afraid of is the 201st. This war game was a plan to find out what it would need, what we need to do to prepare for the inevitable future. Now, it was a collaborative effort between Johns Hopkins University, one of the first progressive universities in the country, if not the first, Bill Gates, and the World Economic Forum. When the participants sat down to begin the game, this is what they were shown. Watch.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died.
Sound familiar? If you just exchange pigs for bats, you have exactly what's happening right now. I'm going to get more into this after the next break, but I'm not saying, and I want to make this clear, this was not started by the people that organized Event 201. This is just what these people do. They war game future crisis. They nailed this one. But they also nailed the plans for a larger, more centralized government in response to it. It's what they did for climate change, and it's also what they had in mind for a global pandemic. Bill and Melinda Gates, who co-sponsored the event, have made advocating for Agenda 2030 one of their main endeavors. They produce all kinds of things. They do this report, Goalkeepers. They produce it every year to ensure all 17 Sustainable Development Goals happen by the year 2030. Multiple other participants are directly linked to Agenda 2030. Sophia Borges, she is the UN Foundation's senior vice president. She was the chief negotiator from the UN, compelling countries to adopt Agenda 2030. Then there's Eduardo Martinez. He's an executive at UPS. He also serves on Impact 2030, a coalition to, quote, advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and on the board of United Nations Public-Private Sector Coalition. Did you know UPS was involved in this? The merging of public and private sectors. You're going to hear a lot about this. The other members included government officials at the highest levels, like the heads of the CDC in China and even the director of the CDC here in the United States. This scenario provided a direct pipeline from people pushing Agenda 2030 directly to targeted businesses and public policy makers. If you watch this entire event, which you can, one overriding theme always comes up. It's this.
The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics.
And we know from past responses that public-private cooperation will be essential.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
Global business and government coming together. That came up over and over and over again. And when the question of who should be given the global centralized orders, of course, Agenda 2030 UN rep spoke up immediately.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. And I wanted to speak to the point about having the honors broken. I think in this regard, the United Nations fits the bill. I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
Global crisis, business merging with government and giving the power and the credibility to the UN and WHO. Boy, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. No matter what the attendees tried to do, no matter what solutions they came up with, the scenario was designed and destined for catastrophe. In my opinion, it's To use a Star Trek reference, the Kobayashi Maru, it was rigged from the start. In the simulation, 65 million people died. Global GDP retracts 11%. Markets go down 40%. This is their final produced video. See if any of it sounds familiar. Watch.
Attempts to control media messaging, originally aimed only at health-related misinformation, became used increasingly to quash political dissent. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have to ask, did this need to be so bad? Are there things we could have done in the 5 to 10 years leading up to the pandemic that would have lessened the catastrophic consequences? We believe the answer is yes. So, are we as a global community now finally ready to do the hard work needed to prepare for the next pandemic?
They didn't have 5 years to prepare. Instead, they had about 5 weeks. And are they not describing exactly to the T the chalkboard I opened my show with today? Faith in media, corporations, government, eroding, economic collapse, civil unrest, and a cry to prepare for the next crisis. I showed you who these people are and what they've been working on since 1992, and prepare in their minds means global centralized control. A global outbreak is exactly the kind of event that they've been waiting for. Climate change was taking too long and it was losing. Well, hear it from their own mouths. Watch.
The annualized risk posed by pandemics is on par and rivals with climate change.
The scariest thing about Event 201 is that almost everything they predicted has come true. They predicted overwhelmed hospitals, the lack of PPE and ventilators, experimental drugs like hydroxychloroquine that would come out, everything. And their predictions will be used as ammo to push their radical agendas. I believe it is their intention to fundamentally transform the world and mold it into a centrally controlled monstrosity. Now that you've seen, read, or heard their plans for yourselves, do you agree with it? If you've just only seen this, don't answer that question. Go and do your own homework and then come back to the show. Make sure that you're heard by local and state and federal government officials. Global socialism, not on our watch.